Mike, Tim only says the nicest things about you.
Sure.
I can remember a few years ago, my wife and I had just left our home. We were going to drive over to my in-laws. They lived just a few minutes away, and we hadn't made it out of our neighborhood when I realized that I had left my phone at home. And so I just told my wife, I said, Carrie, I left my phone at home. And she said, that's okay. And I thought she meant like, that's okay, just turn around, we'll go back and get it. And as I started to turn around, she says, what are you doing? I said, well, I said, I left my phone at home. And she said, no, that's okay. We're just going over for a couple hours. You'll be fine. Some of you relate with what I'm about to say, but I don't know why that made me anxious. I love my in-laws. Don't tell them otherwise. It's not that I was going to be... I think it's because I was nervous, like what if someone calls? What if I receive a text and I'm not there to get it? And my wife... And I was like, I'm going to wait because she's going to forget her phone eventually. And then I'm going to call. And it turns out she forgets her phone all the time and it doesn't bother her at all. It's funny to look at myself that way because flashback to 15 plus years ago when I was in college, I can remember being a freshman at Oklahoma Christian and I didn't have a cell phone. In fact, I was very, very adamant about not getting a cell phone. To me, it seemed like a burden, not a blessing. Why would I want to, at any moment of the day, you can get in touch with me? No, I want to be able to float. If you want to leave a message at my dorm, I'll check it and I'll give you a call back later. For me, I was like, why would I? Then I met my wife, and she said, you need to get a phone because I can't ever get a hold of you. And I did. But as I look at freshman year of college, Jeremy, compared to just a couple years ago, Jeremy, I'm like, look how much things have changed. And it's not just with me, it's with our world. Some of you have only known this world in which people are completely just caught up in their electronic devices. But most of you, like me, can remember a time in life when that was not the case. You went out and you needed to learn something, and what did you have to do? You had to find a book, right? Now I'm like, oh, what's the name of that one person that I saw one time in this one TV show? 30 seconds later, I can find it on my phone. But things have changed, right? So some of you grew up this way. Some of you can remember a distinct difference. And I think it is fair to say that we live in a time in which many people are completely ruled by their electronic devices. I guess I may have missed a group. There may be some who grew up here and some grew up differently, and some of you don't know what an electronic device is. And those group, you can just be asleep for the next 30 minutes. But most of us, we observe the world around us and we recognize that, look, there's a problem. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of blessings that come with technology. A year and a half ago when the world shut down and we at North MacArthur, along with many others, were forced to be at home for several weeks, man, what a blessing that we could view sermons and have this, not the same as worship, but we could participate online and still feel like we had some version of what we had before. That was a great blessing. I have friends who are missionaries on the other side of the world, and it is great that I can pull out my cell phone and in just a couple of seconds connect with them on FaceTime and have a conversation with them. So there are great blessings, and I don't want this to sound like this is just Jeremy getting up and bashing technology, because it comes with great blessings if we use it the way God has with to use it. Unfortunately, there also comes challenges. You're probably aware of many of those. Things that we use technology to accomplish, or just our relationship with technology that I think gets in the way of our relationship with God. And so this may seem strange, but tonight we are actually going to talk about idolatry. Idolatry may be something that when we think of that term, we think of something that people dealt with a long time ago. No, that's, the Israelites, they struggled with idolatry. Or we think of something that is a problem over on the other side of the world where they've got physical idols set up. But idolatry is just as much a problem here in America right now as it has ever been with God's people. And so I want to spend some time tonight talking about idolatry and how we can make sure that the blessings that God has given us through technology don't become something of an idol for us. Turn over in your Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Look, there are passages all throughout the Bible that condemn idolatry. I doubt anyone is sitting here tonight and is just blown away by that statement. Idolatry is something God is not pleased with. When he gives the law to Moses, the very first law is you shall have no other gods before me. Second law, don't make any graven images. And so from the very beginning, when God started giving law to his people, it was clear. Idolatry is wrong. And so that shouldn't surprise us that we're going to start with there. But I think Deuteronomy chapter 4 gives us a good definition of what idolatry is. Because for some, an idol is a little metal or wooden thing that sits up on your shelf and is worshipped. And that's not always the case. So in Deuteronomy chapter 4, we're going to start in verse 15. Listen to the way that idolatry is defined. So watch yourselves carefully, since you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, so that you do not act corruptly and make a graven image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that's on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that's in the water below. Okay, so you hear those things and you're like, see, it's a little image that you make. But then listen in verse 19. And beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. So when you look at this passage and the way it defines idolatry, it is when we take things that God has given to us as a blessing and we turn those things into the object of our worship. Look, these things that they were making into idols, whether it was an animal or some person, those were things that God had created. And they are taking the created and they are worshiping the created as if it's the creator. I love this phrase where it says, and be drawn away. I mean, is that not the idea of idolatry? Our focus should be on God, but we have these things that draw us away from him. And so an idol is anything that draws our worship, draws our dedication away from God and focuses it on something else. Can that be something that we have now in America? Absolutely. And it's not just technology. I mean, sports become an idol for some people. Jobs become an idol for some people. Even good things like family and friendships can become an idol if we're not careful. When we are drawn away by these things and allow them to become an idol for us. And so this evening, this is hopefully just going to be super practical. I want to talk about how do I as an individual know when I have allowed the technology in my life, those things that God has given to me as a blessing, when do I know that those things are no longer just a blessing, but they have become an idol for me? And so I have 3 questions tonight that I want each of us to ask ourselves as kind of a test. Number 1, do you become anxious or worried when you can't use it? I have a 4-year-old child at home. We have been extra cautious about not allowing her to spend a lot of time in front of a screen. But I'm a youth minister, and it is the summertime, and I have spent some time on trips this summer. And when I was away, our 4-year-old went to Mimi's house for the week and learned that she really enjoys playing games on Mimi's iPad. It was harmless. You know, when you're at Mimi's, you bend the rules a little bit, right? You stay up later, you eat cake for dinner. I get it. Man, my 4-year-old daughter already deals with this, and it's just games. She'll come in, can I play with the iPad? I'm like, no, we're not going to do that today. And she loses it. Because for her, in that week, she became attached to it. It's something that she wants, she desires. And so I've already mentioned how this has become a struggle for me when I didn't even know it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You've left somewhere, and you've left your phone at home, and all of a sudden, you feel anxious. You feel, well, what if somebody calls? What if I get a text? And if you're like me, you always get back to your phone and no calls, no texts. And you remember, I don't really talk to people, so I just like to think of myself as super great when my phone is left at home. I took a group of young people out to float the Illinois River in Oklahoma. It was going to be it's just 2 days. 2 days. For a lot of you, you're like, I could be away from my phone for 2 days. So we arrive at the campsite, and I had told the kids, look, we're going out like in the hills. I don't know if Oklahoma has, I'm from Colorado, so we have like hills and mountains. But we were out in the hills of Oklahoma, and one of our girls said, well, I don't have service. I was like, yeah. She's like, is there service like up the road? I was like, probably not. Now, I didn't know at the time this was a thing, but at the time, Snapchat was a big app. And the whole point of this app for a while was you just send pictures back and forth with a friend, and you try to build a streak. Like, it had been almost over a year that this girl and some friend had sent a picture back and forth. And it was usually a picture of, like, the sky, just so she can say, I've kept my streak alive. And she told me, I'm going to lose my streak. And I said, I don't know what that is. And after she described it to me, I said, that's okay. Well, it wasn't okay. She got worried. She got stressed. She began walking down the road like this, trying desperately to get service. Ended up driving into Tulsa for dinner that night, so she kept her streak alive. I'm not a cold, heartless youth minister, but that was a moment for me that I realized, wow, there are people who not being able to be around their phone or not being able to use their phone in a certain way, it makes them anxious. There was a time where I thought this was just true with young people, and it's certainly something young people deal with. It's not true anymore. And I spent a few minutes with my dad, and I realized, like, that is a man who he grew up not around a phone, but like now it's a big part of what he does with work, and so he's on it a lot, and sometimes I'll just take his phone and put it in my pocket. Yeah, it is bad, but it's also fun. And he'll say, where's my phone? Oh, maybe one of the kids grabbed it. And he'll look, and I was like, it's all right, we're here. You don't need your phone. No, I got to find my phone. Oh, here it is. I found it in my pocket. One of the kids must have slipped it in there. This is not just a problem that young people have. We get anxious and worried when we cannot be around it. And it doesn't just have to be our phone. It can be your computer, it can be your television, it can be your tablet, whatever it is. Here's a test for you. Take one evening of the week that you and your family are going to say, we're going to put all our devices in the other room for the night, and you can't be around it. Some of you have families that are going to be crawling the wall because that's not how we interact. We like to have our phones. But if you can't enjoy an evening away from your phone, your social media, Netflix, whatever it is, for one night, could be a sign that those things matter more to you than they should, right? So number one, do you become anxious or worried when you can't use it? Number two, do you invest the majority of your free time toward it? I say free time because I understand that there are some of us who work jobs where we're in front of a screen. And don't walk into your boss on Monday morning and say, hey, I heard this sermon Sunday night. I'm supposed to scale back my screen time. So could you just, that's not going to fly. Your boss is going to be like, actually, I can scale it back 100%. You go on home. Especially now where a lot of people are working from home. I get that. We are in front of a screen. But eventually work ends and we just transplant from one screen to a different screen, right? This is something that's maybe not as new. I can remember school was over, we came home, first place we went was that TV until my mom came in and was like, nope, you can go play outside for a little bit. We just are drawn to it. That's what we want to be around. And so that's why I say free time. When you're sitting around at home in the evenings, what are you doing? I hear young people all the time tell me that the reason that their study life in God's Word isn't what they wish it was is because they just don't have enough time. Well, because of school and all they've got going on, I just don't have enough time. And then I'm like, hey man, how many hours have you invested into that video game this week? Oh, you don't want to know. I'm like, wait a second. I thought you didn't have enough time. Well, I don't because I was doing the video game when I was supposed to be doing my homework. How do you use your free time? How do you use your evenings? How do you use the time that you get away? When you finally get time with your family, are we glued to a screen? How many of you can remember what it was like waiting in a line before phones? Some of you know what I'm talking about. What did you do? You waited in line, I guess. Now, you get in a line anywhere. I mean, if it's 3 or 4 people deep, oh, I got to get my phone out. Because I don't want to accidentally have a conversation with someone around me. I went to the DMV a few weeks ago, which was a mistake, but I had to. And the line was 20 people long, and everyone was on their phone. That's just how it is now. Oh, I have free time, got to be on my phone. When I stood in line 2 hours to vote last year, everybody was on their phone except one lady. And she just looked around. I could just tell she wanted to talk to somebody so bad. And I was just like, I'll talk to you for a minute. And I got my phone back out. That's just the way we are. How do you use, as soon as you get free time, is your first thought, I need to look at my phone, or I need to get the tablet out. I need to get on social media. I need to hop on Facebook and see what's going on. Again, I know this is something that we stereotypically think just young people deal with, but now that Facebook shows you that little green light when someone is active, oh man, I watch some people, I'm like, you've been on Facebook all day. They're like, how do you know? Unless you've been on Facebook all day. I'm like, well played. Well played. How do we invest our free time? If we do invest the majority of our time toward those things, and again, this doesn't just relate to technology, it relates to anything in our life. If we invest the majority of our time toward those things, that's showing that those things are important for us. Then question number 3, has using it led to sinful behaviors beyond just idolatry? So sometimes an idol is wrong because we care more about it than we should. But sometimes the danger in idolatry is not just the image, but what we are led into. Like when you read through the story of Israel, it's not just that they worshiped some little idol. It's that they worshiped that idol, and then because of their worship to that idol, they got into all sorts of other practices that they shouldn't be into. Technology isn't just about, well, I spent too much time on it. But because I spent too much time on it, now I'm involved in things I shouldn't be involved with. Maybe it's I have a negative self-image of myself because all I ever do is compare myself with everyone else that I see on social media. Maybe I'm overly critical on social media when I see people post opinions that I don't share. And now I'm going to get on there and I'm going to shred them as if not everybody can see what I'm saying. Maybe it is like many in our culture are dealing with right now. We're caught up in the impurity that we can find online. Are there great blessings with technology? Yes, but when we allow those things to become idols for us, it's not very long before we start getting involved in sins that we didn't originally intend to be involved with. And again, I know when we think about technology, you may just think about, well, impure things. That's the real problem with technology. But the truth is, as you look at it, there are so many different ways that we can use technology improperly. And we have to be very careful that we don't allow ourselves to take something that God has given us as a good gift and use those things in a negative way. I mean, isn't that what all sin is? Taking good blessings from God and twisting them into things they weren't intended to be. That's what sin is. And so again, this is not everybody, we're going to go out in the parking lot and we're going to start a fire and just start throwing your devices in. We're not doing that tonight. It sounds fun. I don't know if they'll explode, but it would definitely draw a crowd. So, but I do want us to consider the ways we use those things and ask ourselves, is it possible that in my life, these things have become too important for me? So ask yourselves, do I become anxious or worried when I can't be around it? Do I invest the majority of my time in it? Has using it led to other sinful behaviors beyond just idolatry? If you answer yes to any of those questions, it may be time to say, all right, I need to do something about that. Now, if you answer yes and you're like, oh, yes, it's an idol. Okay, that's all. No, you got to take the next step and do something about it. So the question becomes then, what do we do? What do we do if look, most of us, it happened slowly over time. I mentioned when cell phones first became a thing, I was not interested in it. And then how do I get from a point where I don't even want a phone to I can't even leave my phone without feeling anxious because I don't have my phone on me? Well, it's a slow, gradual thing. And because of that, some of us have put ourselves into a position in our life where if we just got rid of technology altogether, we'd be in a tough spot. Because we have built up a life in which we feel like we have to have it. We need it. And so before we talk about some things that we can do to help, I think it's important for us to understand what might have to take place. So turn over to Matthew chapter 5. In Matthew chapter 5, this will surprise you, but this is a passage in which Jesus was not thinking about cell phones because cell phones had not been invented yet. But this message that Jesus gives here in this passage connects just as much with the way we use technology as it does any other area of our life. And this is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 29. He says, if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you, for it's better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Now, I'm just telling you, I think there are people in this world that if they had to choose between getting rid of technology in order to help their spiritual life, or just accepting their fate that, you know what, then I guess this is where I'm destined for, they'll do it. There are kids in my youth group where if the answer was, you got to get rid of your cell phone, then they're like, well, then I guess I don't want to change. But that is because of the culture that we live in. We have created this world in which we feel like we have to have it. But what Jesus is saying in this passage, if there is anything in your life causing you to stumble and you can't figure out how to get around it, you know what you got to do? You got to get rid of it. I promise you, when these people heard Jesus make this statement, they were uncomfortable. Hey, your right eye's causing you to stumble? Hey, what? Did Jesus say I'm supposed to pull my eyeball out? Again, I don't think Jesus is being literal, but I think people got Jesus' point. He is being extreme with what he says. And so the question is, if I get to a point where I've tried and I've tried some different things and I've tried to get accountable with some people, but at the end of the day, I still just find my phone or my device being something that trips me up, am I willing to say, all right, I'll kick it to the curb? Some of you are like, hey, well, I need my phone for work. Well, could you use a flip phone? Flip phones for young people. Flip phones are these things that it just flips open and there's just a small, tiny screen. Ask your parents about it. We have an elder at North MacArthur who, for years, just had a flip phone. And finally, his wife convinced him to buy a smartphone. And so he did. He bought an iPhone. He used it for a week and he took it back and he said, here you go. And he gave it to them and he gave him this flip phone and he said, whatever you need to do to make that work again, please do it. He lives a very productive, healthy, normal life with a flip phone. He makes calls, he texts. He's one of the most active communicators within our congregation. And guess what? He does it without a smartphone. So if he can live his life without one, you can too. Now, it may offer some challenges, but I promise you the challenges that you will face not having a phone are worth it if the challenges that you had having a phone are causing you spiritual struggles. I would rather have to print out directions to a place than deal with temptations that I don't want in my life. Does that make sense? I'd rather those struggles. Man, coming here, I'd have been in trouble without my phone. The directions were helpful, but I also used to drive all over the place without a phone, and most of the time I got there. And so, like Jesus is saying, we need to be willing to say, you know what? If it's got to go, then it's got to go. Now, do I think there are some things we can do to help ourselves, to put ourselves into a better position? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if I've tried some things and I'm like, look, this is still a struggle for me, it may be time to go. Okay, so here are some things, this is Jeremy's suggestions based on my interaction with young families who are dealing with some of these issues. Here are some things that you can do to help yourself if you answered yes to one of those questions. Number one, set boundaries. Okay, if your struggle is that you are always extra critical on social media, then that is where you need to set some boundaries. Maybe your boundary is I'm not going to comment on posts of people that I disagree with because I know how quickly I get fired up and say things that I don't mean to say. Words, like there are times where I'm standing in front of someone face to face and something pops in my mind, but there's this filter, right, that catches it and says, ooh, don't say that. Now, some of us, our filter is not as strong as others, but most of us have some filter that catches it. But for some reason, when I can't see your face, when I'm sitting in a screen and you're sitting in a screen, that filter a lot of times disappears. And so your boundary that you may need to set may just be like, I'm going to spend less time with this area of social media, or I'm going to spend just less time on my phone. For as much as I think Apple and some of these companies are doing everything in their power to take money from us, they also do a lot of great things that I think can help our families. They have things on your phone set up to where you can set boundaries for yourself. I have it on my phone that after a certain amount of time, it tells me, oh, you're out of time on that app. Now, I can click this button that says, extend it for 15 minutes. And I'm working on that. Like, I need to find a way that when it hits it, it's like, just kidding, you can't. But set boundaries for yourself. Select certain times of your day that you're not going to be around it. Can I just recommend some? Meal times with your family, be off of it. There's nothing more heartbreaking than walking into a restaurant and seeing an entire family sitting at a table, and you can see the one member of the family that would really like to engage with everyone else, and then everybody else is on their phone. It's sad. You're like, there's this couple, like, oh, they must be on a date. He's on his phone. She will not be going on another date with this guy. Those times, make those special times. Put it away. Family times, set time aside during the week that we're putting it away. Parents, your kids aren't going to love it at first. That's okay. It'll be good for them. Kids, take it easy on them. They're trying, okay? Certain stretches during the evening. Maybe it's a certain night each week that you're just going to set it aside. And if it's really hard, that means you should probably set more boundaries because it's something that you struggle with. And if it's super easy, then who cares? Then you struggle with it anyways. So boundaries are good. Set time limits for yourself, whether that's with your phone altogether or setting time limits for certain apps. And then take time away. If you find that being on technology is a real struggle for you, I've seen people recently who fast from technology. I have a good friend who decided that for an entire year, he was going to get off social media. And it has been almost 4 years now, and guess what? He is still fasting from social media. He found out, hey, I actually enjoy my life more when I'm not on social media. Now, I also know other people who have fasted for a week, and they came back from that as if I fasted from food for a week. Ready to eat. All right, I'm back. But take some time away. Say, hey, I'm going to get off of Facebook for a month, or I'm going to delete this app off my phone for so much. Take some time away, and you'll find, I think, it's actually freeing. My wife and I, a couple years ago, decided we were going to do a fast from all social media. And, of course, my wife loved it. And me, I tried to say that it was like because I'm a minister and I'm trying to connect with people, but she wasn't buying that, rightly so. I like to be on there. It's just my safe place. That's the way I've grown, and now I have a problem. And so for me, it was hard, but that means it was good. And it was nice to have someone that was doing it alongside with me. Have some accountability, some people that know that you are trying to cut back. That's why I love when people will post something online and say, hey, just wanted to let everybody know that I'm stepping off of Facebook for a month. Because a week later, when they comment on someone's post, I like to just pop in and be like, I thought you were fasting. They're like, I am. Thank you. Have some accountability, though. That's a good thing. Fasting isn't just something that we should do with food. Fasting is something in which we are taking time away from something that we devote too much time to, and we are now pouring that time into God. Okay? And so it may be that you need to take some time away. It also may be time for some of us to just say, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me in my life. There are certain apps, I feel like Young people love to have social media platforms that their parents are not on. I can remember growing up, we would have friends over and we would all want to go down to the basement back to my bedroom to hang out because that's where mom and dad were not hanging out. And no offense, parents, but we don't like to hang out with our parents all the time, right? And the same is true online. And so as I've seen young people kind of migrate from one, first the young people were on Facebook, but then all us old people got on Facebook. So then the young people went to Twitter, and then the old people were like, hey, we'll go to Twitter. And we just like us old, see how I'm saying us old people? I'm not judging anyone. We old people are following the young kids, and they're like, leave us alone. So on that journey, I've watched that there have been some apps, some social media platforms that young people have used, and I'm like, that's just not one I need to get caught up in. That is not something I need. And so I've just said, nope. I'm not making that decision for everybody, but there may be some apps, devices, streaming services that you just say, no, like I'm not going to do it. That is okay. I know that we live in a world that is controlled by our electronic devices, but that does not mean that we have to live the same way that everyone around us lives. If we can use these things for good, if we can use these things to help accomplish God's will, great. But when those things start getting in the way and they're becoming idols for us, it's time for us to say, all right, what do I need to make an adjustment? Look, for some of you tonight, you are like my wife, and you're like, this was a really nice talk, guy, but I don't struggle with this. And that's great. My message for you would be patient with those around you who this may be a struggle with. Help them. Because for a lot of people, this is a very serious problem. For others of you, you're like me. For some reason, I'm even using an iPad for my notes tonight. And I never do this, but my printer wasn't working. And so I was like, I can't speak on not using devices on a device, but that just shows you where we're at, all right? Some of you have developed an addiction to your phone. You are addicted to your phone. I will just challenge you. I don't know all phones, but I know with Apple products, you can go and check usage and see how long you have used certain apps. And I'll just promise you, you'll be blown away, some of you, by how much time we spend on those devices. And so my message for you, if you are like me, is take some steps to scale back. Because you may not have started down the path thinking, oh, I'm going to become an idol worshiper. But somewhere along the way, our devices have become idols for us. And we need to do what it takes to make sure that God still has our heart, even if that means cutting some things off altogether. If that is your struggle tonight, or if you have some other struggle, I'm not a member here, but I know how the church is. We want to help one another. And so if you have a struggle tonight, or if you need prayers, or if there's some other way that the church here can serve you, we want to invite you forward as we stand and sing this song.